Logistics, warehousing, and fulfillment are the clear winners this year. The segment of industrial real estate has remained strong and resilient throughout the course of the pandemic, according to Price Waterhouse Coopers. In large part due to the surge in demand for e-commerce, food delivery services, home improvement retailers, and to a lesser extent, medical supply companies. Much of the country continued to see tight market conditions, according to the CBRE's report for the second quarter of 2020 last year. The availability rate has edged up, but at only 3.5%, it's well below the 10-year average of 5.1%. Chad Griffiths is an industrial real estate broker who has completed over 500 transactions with clients ranging from local companies to institutional owners. He joined me this week to share his passion for industrial real estate and to provide a gauge of where the industry currently stands. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Inquiring minds want to know, where exactly did Griffiths' passion for the profession of industrial real estate originate from? Thus, that's exactly how we kicked off our lively and informative conversation.
A great question, Kevin. It's interesting. I actually stumbled into industrial real estate. So a lot of people are familiar with real estate, like homes or perhaps shopping centers or office buildings. But I actually, for the last 17 years, I've been focused on industrial real estate. So like warehouses and manufacturing centers. And I stumbled into it accidentally just because I was the brokerage that I happened to join in 2005. And I didn't even know what industrial real estate was at the time, but my office was heavily involved in it. There were some mentors that I had that I looked up to that got me in the right direction. And over the last 16 or 17 years now, I can say I'm very glad that I found it because it's just been an awesome industry to work in.
Absolutely. And now I want to know all about your ups, downs, and everything in between. How do you think you've grown as a person since entering the field, buddy?
Yeah, I like how you're digging into that because a lot of people like talking about the ups that they have, but the downs also tell the full story. So I've had some career successes, winning some awards and being recognized for a few different things, which I'm very grateful for. But I also had a lot of setbacks and downs in the industry. When I first started learning, I made a number of mistakes. I made some mistakes that cost me financially. I didn't get sued, but I had to basically pay to fix the problems. That hurt. And then just the embarrassment of making a public mistake early in my career, that was also embarrassing as well. So I'd say that the downs, I had a lot more downs in the beginning of my career as I was just trying to get established and trying to learn the business. Fortunately, I haven't made as many mistakes in recent years, but that's something that I always have to keep on top of is to try to avoid making those mistakes, because if I make a mistake, it's going to affect one of my clients. So I really try to avoid those at all costs.
You know, Chad, I always say that life is a growing experience, and when you close your mind off to learning is when you die. So I think we're all learning and evolving, right, in every aspect of life.
That's a great point.
So, and I know that you were recently given or named the Industrial Influencer of the Year by Globe Star. So tell me, what do you think that honor means to you, and where do you think that ranks in your career, bud?
Yeah, thanks for noting that, Kevin. And I guess it's similar to you with your podcast, Let's Have the Conversation, where I've done a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people probably don't appreciate. I know you've got a pretty good following on YouTube and people value the content that you're putting out there. And for me, I've been doing a YouTube channel for the last year, trying to just build out some information so that people can learn more about industrial real estate. And hopefully I have some wisdom or knowledge to share with them. So to be recognized by the magazine as being an industrial influencer was just a nice pat on the back, saying that that we appreciate the work that you're doing and here's some recognition for it. So I was very grateful to be named on that. And yeah, thanks again for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And now I want to dive into some industry specifics. As you know, COVID-19 has affected a lot of things, and with people staying at home and not venturing out as much. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the current state of industrial real estate as an industry, Bonnie.
Yeah, it's fascinating from the standpoint that we would have thought that there would have been more disruption when COVID was first coming out in March, late or mid March of last year. I thought there'd be a lot more long-term implications for the real estate market and the economy as a whole, but it turned out that industrial real estate has actually fared very well. And I think that that's just a product of a lot of people shifting their habits from going to the store, buying things at a store and bringing it home, to now ordering it online and have it delivered to their house. And when that progression has evolved, what that meant is that there needs to be a lot more warehousing in the supply chain of getting things from where they're made to a warehouse to ultimately to the person's house. So that warehousing side of industrial real estate, and we're all probably familiar with it. I'm guessing you have an Amazon fulfillment center in Windsor now, or at least one very close to Windsor, where that didn't even exist 5 or 10 years ago. In my market, Amazon just did a 1 million square foot facility, and they've got plans to do another 2.5 million square feet worth of industrial space as well. So the e-commerce side of the business has really put a lot of demand on warehousing, to the point that a lot of that industrial real estate is now priced at record highs. So COVID hasn't been friendly to certain areas. Like, it hasn't helped the restaurant industry or the hospitality, hasn't helped the office market, and it's still hurt retail. But on the industrial side, industrial's still done remarkably well.
Yeah, you brought up the whole working from home and shopping from home, and so that leads into my next question. How do you think, from an efficiency standpoint, with so many people opting to do that, can be viewed as a net positive for the industry as well?
It's funny because I am really involved in industrial real estate. You would think that I'd be biased towards being a big supporter of it, but I actually think that there could be some long-term pain that comes with it. And going back to these large distribution centers, quite often these big fulfillment centers are offering a very poor wage. And by poor, in comparison to what some other industries will offer, they get a low wage as a salary, and then they also pay low property taxes. So I think that if that does keep growing, if we keep seeing more growth in e-commerce and more contraction in the traditional retail space, that could result in more people earning less money, and it could also result in fewer tax dollars being collected by all the municipalities, which, as you know, Kevin, that's what's needed to run a city. The city, they rely on property tax revenue to fund their operations. And if we see property tax revenue decline, then there's going to have to be some offsetting effect, where either other properties get taxed more or there's less services. So I'm a big proponent of industrial real estate, and I spend all my working hours working in that industry. But I do think we should also be concerned about what it could mean years or perhaps decades down the road.
And Ted, tell me, I'm curious, as we enter the last third of the year, what are your industry professionals talking about when you get together? What do you think is the industry trends that'll have people talking as we end this year and go into 2022?
One interesting one that I'm watching, and I've actually seen it starting to develop over the past couple of years, is indoor or urban farming, as it's often called. And I've actually been involved in a couple of these transactions. Well, they'll take a large warehouse space and actually convert it into vertical farming. So everything's done in a closed environment. There's regular monitoring. They water everything. They're basically growing all types of food in warehouse space. And I think that this is interesting from the standpoint that it will add a new dimension of the food supply and perhaps take that off stuff being imported from other markets to now being grown in your own backyard, albeit in a warehouse, on how that will actually affect the supply chain and how it will affect prices for food. So that's an interesting one that we're watching. And I also think another one will just be how much e-commerce continues to grow. And with that, not just e-commerce for dry goods, but even for cold goods, because a lot of stuff, especially food, naturally has to be stored in cold environments. So one trend that is popping up is, will we see more cold space, like a large warehouse that's devoted entirely as a cooler to product that just needs to be cold or frozen in the process of being delivered. So those would be the two that I think are of most interest, that probably isn't on a lot of people's radar, but should be something to watch going into the future here.
Yeah, and you brought up the price of food and supply chains, and certainly as we go to the grocery store, grocery prices are going up steadily because there's more demand than there is product, and getting it out to the consumer is becoming more challenging. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, as we look at food and sort of the industrial uh, impact of that. How do you think we'll see that in the pocketbook, I guess, when we go to the grocery store?
Well, I would hope that this recent run of inflation that we've had doesn't continue, because if it does, I believe the number was 4% last quarter, is that the inflation went up quarter over quarter. That's not sustainable. If we're all going to start seeing those types of increases in all the consumer goods, then it's just make it prohibitively expensive to start buying certain types of food. And I think everyone will have to be a lot more conscious of what they purchase at a grocery store. So I would hope that some of these innovations that are coming down the road, like vertical farming or more advanced cold storage, where things can be shipped and stored more efficiently, I would hope that there's some innovation in there, that it does drive down the cost of not just groceries, but everything across what we order on a day-to-day basis. Because I'm sure, like you, Kevin, I'm getting tired of the cost of things that I want to buy exceeding the amount of revenue that I have coming in.
Everything goes up except wages, right?
Isn't that the sad truth? Everything goes up but wages.
Absolutely. And Chad, I'm curious to ask you about investing in commercial and industrial real estate in terms of the the principles you have to sort of make a smart investment when you're looking to invest in this type of real estate.
Yeah, I've got two main criteria when I'm looking at an investment, and it's the start of evaluating it, not meant to be everything that I include, but just the start. And that's the first, is that I always think long term with these investments. My typical holding period that I'll analyze a property that I'm considering is 10 years. So I'd perhaps go as short as 5 if I had to, but I like doing a 10-year hold, because there's always going to be aberrations in the economy. There's going to be factors that influence the value of the property, irrespective of anything that I can do. So I believe that if you hold the property long enough, you'll weather those short-term blips. So that's key to me, is to have a long-term horizon. I don't think it's easy to make money in this business at the best of times. And if you're an investor considering a very short time frame, I think it's even harder. And then the 2nd main criteria I have is to always look at my downside risk first. So I'm more of a conservative investor as opposed to some bullish investors who might just think that everything that they do is going to work out. I almost take the approach that everything I'm going to do is going to fail. So I try to get ahead of that beforehand and really have a firm understanding of what my downside risk will be in a property. So what happens if the tenant goes bankrupt, or if they leave, or if they decide not to renew their lease and that property becomes vacant? What will I be able to lease that property out for at that time, or what will it be worth if I need to sell it? And as long as I have a firm understanding of what that downside risk is, and I'm projecting a 10-year horizon on this anyways, then I start making some assumptions on how the property could look in best case scenario or most likely scenario. And if all of that comes together and it looks like something I want to be married to for 10 years, because this is a long-term commitment, and if I can see myself being passionate about this property in 10 years as I am today, then I'm likely going to go forward with it.
Hey, Chad, there's nothing wrong with being a forward thinker. As a journalist and podcast host myself, I always like to be one step ahead. So there's nothing wrong with that, buddy.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
you're doing that. You're with your channel. You've got an awesome group of people that you've interviewed. I love your interview style. You're more than one step forward. I think you're way ahead of the curve in terms of what you're offering to your audience.
well, I appreciate the compliment, and I hear your Canadian accent. So I'm curious for you. What's the best part about being Canadian for you, buddy?
You know what? I think that the best part about being Canadian is that we are a community, and I don't mean that in the sense that it's a neighborhood of people. I think I mean that more of a general term where we do look after each other, and we see that not just in the communities, it extends well beyond that to the point where we've got medical care for anybody who needs it. I hear about people in the States, if they have a bad injury and they don't have insurance for it, it could mean their entire life savings just because they had an accident. Whereas in Canada, I think that there's a sense that we all have a responsibility, an obligation, and a duty to take care of one another. And I don't sense that when I visit the US. I get more of a feeling that in the US they're more fend for yourself. Everybody is I don't want to say on their own, because maybe that makes it sound a little bit too cruel, but it's not nearly the same as Canada, where we do look after each other, whether it's a neighbor across your fence or whether it's someone on the other side of the country. I think we have that patriotic duty to want to make sure that we move forward as one Canada as opposed to fragmented. And I know it's not always like that. Like there are breakdowns in that process, and there are cracks in the cement. But I think as a mentality, at least, that's what I think I'd be most proud of as a Canadian.
I'm tempted to break out and sing "I Am Canadian," Chad. Thanks for that answer, buddy. Uh, and I'm also wondering, Chad, for you, what's the best part about living life personally?
You know what? Great question too, Kevin. I would say that the best part is that I have a career that I legitimately love doing. I love waking up in the morning and tackling the day and seeing what it's going to bring. And I've got an amazing family with a wife and two young children who are just amazing. And so I'm really blessed. I'm really fortunate that I have that family that's a great support system, and I have a career that I love. So I really don't have many things to complain about.
Yeah, and my final question for you is, how do you think you want your personal and professional legacy to be defined?
That's another great question. I would say that I'd really like to be remembered, whether it is professionally or personally. I'd really like to be remembered as somebody that was willing to help without needing a thank you or needing something in return. Whatever that was, if it was a work colleague, if it was somebody that I know, if it was a friend or family member, I'd like to think that I was always available to help without having my hand out to get something back in return. In a very short sentence, that's what I would say.
Fantastic. And tell me finally, Chad, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about industrial real estate. I'd love it if anyone was interested. They want to go and check it out. I know it's not for everybody. If you're not invested or not involved in industrial real estate in any capacity, it might not have any interest to you. But if you are interested, just search my name in YouTube, Chad Griffiths, or you can just search industrial real estate and my videos should pop up.
Fantastic. Well, Chad, I filled up a notebook while we were talking, and I want to thank you for your insightful insight and providing me some time in your schedule to go over your passion both in life and professionally. Really great talking with you this afternoon, and I want to thank you for being here. It's most appreciated.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And those were fantastic questions, very well thought out. I had to really think about a few of those. So well done. You're an awesome host, and I look forward to catching more on your channel as well.